Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Murder in Retrograde. Today, we are going to update you on two different cases. First, just a quick update on the very first case we ever brought you in episode 1, the Delphi murders. This was Abby Williams and Libby German, who were murdered in 2017 in Delphi, Indiana. And as we all know, there have been no solid persons of interest in this case, but now they have given out more information, which makes it sound like they have some sort of lead. On Monday, December 6th, Indiana State Police announced, quote, while investigating the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, detectives with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office and the Indiana State Police have uncovered an online profile named Anthony_Shots, end quote. They went on to say this profile was being used from 2016 to 2017 on social media applications, including but not limited to Snapchat and Instagram. And this fictitious Anthony Shots profile used images of a known male model and portrayed himself as being extremely wealthy and owning numerous sports cars. The creator of the fictitious profile used this information while communicating with juvenile females to solicit nude images, obtain their addresses, and attempt to meet them. So his quote on his profile was new account, follow me, Alaska born, Indiana raised. It went on to say travel, living, LA, New York, business, travel. And the pictures are like, it looks like Justin Bieber to me.
I was just going to say he looks just like Justin Bieber, like young Justin Bieber.
It's like a pretty boy. It's an actual person who they tracked down. The Daily Beast tracked down. And he's like a sometime model, and he lives in Alaska, and he's a police officer.
If I read it correctly, I thought the police had said they'd already found the guy and spoken with him, and it's not him they're looking for. It's just whoever created this account, basically catfishing him.
Right. Yeah. He had nothing to do with it. So clearly this person was trying to lure young girls around the age of Abby and Libby. So it's not this man that's in the pictures, but they do know the Indiana State Police tracked the person who actually created this account, and he lives in Indiana. His name is Keegan Anthony Klein. And he was interviewed by law enforcement and initially denied creating any fake social media accounts. And then later in the interview admitted to creating the Anthony Shots profile and speaking to underage girls. He's 27 years old and he lives in Peru, Indiana, which is like a hour drive northeast of Delphi. And according to court filings, he's currently in prison awaiting trial on charges of child solicitation, child exploitation, possession of child pornography, identity fraud, and obstruction of justice. So he admitted to having been in contact with numerous underage girls on Instagram and Snapchat, who sent him more than 100 sexually explicit photos and videos. He is also conveniently up for pretrial hearing next week in a different case. So the things I was reading online, it's like it's never a coincidence. They do that for a reason. They want to bring attention to it, or they want him to say something, or they want to try to make a deal. They interviewed him Thanksgiving week, and then they went in, they searched his house, and they took his dog, which is very strange to me. Like, they must think they can get some sort of evidence or something.
I feel like it doesn't. I know it does. It because he's got all this like child, endangerment kind of charges against him and this other stuff. But everything I remember hearing about the staging of the bodies and like it was ritualistic in a way, or it could have been, all these little nuggets that were dropped that I feel like this doesn't fit. I mean, I'm not a detective, obviously, but like, I don't know.
He was interviewed 11 days after the girls were murdered, but he was not deemed a person of interest. But we know that Abby and Libby were avid Snapchat users, and that those were the last images we saw of them. This guy had child porn, has done things, obviously is into that. So it just seems weird. I fell down that rabbit hole, which is really disturbing. But I guess people on, there's this theory out there, unsubstantiated completely on Reddit, that says that this guy was totally innocent, but these disgusting humans get these pictures from girls and then they sell those pictures. And so somebody can be somebody total somewhere far away, and it'll say like, this girl lives in Delphi, Indiana. This is her name, number, and here's her picture. So they're saying like he could have sold that to who is actually the killer. So he could like,
that makes more sense.
Because when he's been interviewed, he said things like, God, why did this happen to me? Or he's saying things like he knows something, but he didn't do it. So I don't know. It's interesting.
I feel like that makes more sense than it being him. But again, this is all just from the information that we were given, which was not a lot.
Yeah, if they were there within 11 days and they did a full search warrant and didn't find anything, I would be surprised. So maybe, he's just implicated somehow, but
it's definitely
we will see.
New development, that's for sure.
I've always felt like there's something, there had to have been something. They were lured there or were meeting somebody. It just has to be.
I mean, that it makes more sense than it just being someone being overly prepared, randomly walking through a park, like
to kill one person, maybe, but to kill two people.
Yeah.
It had to have been planned.
I just hope this case, I hope there is some justice in this case sometime sooner than later, because it is definitely a head scratcher. And I just like, we got to get some answers. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And speaking of crazy, the next case that we're going to be talking about. So we've just kind of decided that we're going to just update you as we can with whatever the latest that's going to be going on in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. There's been some talk about there not being a ton of media coverage on this. That's obviously something that Brittany and I feel very passionate about bringing information out, because when you look at the bigger picture, people are alleged of grooming and trafficking and things that could happen to like our children or, people that and it's just like, why is this not being more talked about? Because it's things that we need to be aware of, and it's a dangerous environment. But I think
there's also so many important people involved.
100%.
People need to know.
100%. And so something that I, had kind of found in the New York Times, it has done a lot of pretty good coverage on it. And one of the things that they said is like, why is this not being televised? So their answer is that it basically has to do with the difference in jurisdiction. So federal court in the case of Ghislaine, and the county courts and other two. So there's very detailed, but yet outdated rules that govern the federal proceedings. And the federal judiciary has experimented with pilot programs allowing cameras in civil cases. However, the broadcast of criminal cases has been barred since 1946 under Rule 53 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedures. So it's a bunch of legal jargon for basically its jurisdictions. And, there's a lot of conversation of like what should be and shouldn't be. And I think this goes to say with any case, like it's a little bit tricky, because if you have juries that aren't being sequestered, because we don't do that anymore, we have news flying at us from every angle. So to still be a non-bias going into a case is probably really hard. So I wonder if, that's a big part of it too, I'm sure. But
yeah, and it just the fact that it's so federally, they don't allow cameras, but some states and counties do. Right. And I'm sure it's 1994 that they tried to change that because of OJ, because people got so many ratings and made so much money. They wanted to televise everything. Yeah. So I'm glad they're not allowing cameras in federal cases, because it definitely it's impossible.
I almost think like, okay, if it's allowed, but then like you aren't allowed to air it until after everything's like said and done or something, just in case of, but that's also tricky because things can get leaked or whatever. But I agree. Like, I think it's a dicey conversation on what's the right thing to do. But so that's where we are on that. No cameras allowed, but the media is still allowed to sit in the courtroom. So the charges that Ghislaine Maxwell is facing. So she's facing 6 counts that relate to accusations that she facilitated the sexual exploitation of girls for her longtime companion, Jeffrey Epstein. So the 6 counts center specifically on the accounts of 4 accusers. And those charges are number 1, 1 count of enticement of a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts in which Miss Maxwell is accused specifically of coercing one victim and charging documents to go from Florida to New York between 1994 and 1997 in order to engage in sex acts with Jeffrey Epstein.
Gross.
Yeah. I mean, so much has come out, even so much imagery has come out from this case. And it's like, ugh. So the other count is of transportation of a minor with intent to engage in illegal sex acts, which accuses Miss Maxwell of bringing the same girl from Florida to New York on numerous occasions. 1 count of sex trafficking of a minor, which charges that between 2001 and 2004, Miss Maxwell recruited, enticed, and transported another victim to engage in at least 1 commercial sex act with Jeffrey Epstein.
And I was very curious what a commercial sex act was because it made no sense to me. The definition is it's a sex act on account of which anything of value is given to or received by any person. So it's like prostitution, or, you're having sex for and
Money
given
or
something.
gifts, or that makes more sense because it's a weird terminology. And then there's also 3 counts of conspiracy, which are related to the other counts. So the conspiracy counts in the indictment are more widespread, involving all 4 accusers, as well as homes in the United States and in London. So these charges involve accusations that Miss Maxwell worked with Mr. Epstein to secure underage girls for sex acts, for example, by encouraging one to give Mr. Epstein massages in London between 1994 and 1995. And then she could face a long prison term. Conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of minors alone carries a maximum 40-year sentence. And then the other charges have about maximum penalties from 5 to 10 years. So, I mean, she's looking at some serious time.
And yeah, I mean, if they really throw the book at her, like 80, 90, 100 years.
I mean, she would not be leaving prison for the rest of her life, essentially.
Right.
But it does get a little bit dicey. And so just remember that there's the 4 victims that they are using in this case to prove their case. And there's no one else. And I'll get into it in a little bit later, but just remember that there are 4 like main ones. Nice.
Okay. So Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys are pretty gnarly. Her team, they're the best of the best. And it's almost like if you compare the prosecutors to her defense team, it's like comparing youth on one side and experience on the other, according to the Daily Mail. The 4 prosecuting lawyers trying to put Ghislaine Maxwell behind bars are all in their 30s with a combined age of just 138 years. And then on the other hand, Maxwell has a quartet of defense attorneys who have an average age of 58 and in total are 94 years older than their adversaries. And when you're an attorney, that is wisdom. That's like, you can't deny that people get better as they get older when they're attorneys.
So it's like more experience, the more you're learning from those experiences, like more trials you've been in. I'm sure that's all.
Yeah. The head of her defense team is Bobby Sternheim, 68 years old, who always manages to wear a lot of color, is very flashy. And Sternheim's most high profile client was Osama bin Laden's right-hand man, Khaled al-Fawaz, who was accused of the 1998 bombings of the 2 U.S. embassies in Africa that killed 224 people, including dozens of Americans.
She's and then joke.
Yeah, I can't imagine that she doesn't have the best of. She has so much money. Well, allegedly. I would imagine she has money all over the world being protected for her, from him and from her dad.
Oh, Ghislaine. Yeah.
Yeah. Ghislaine. Christian Everdell, a white-collar defense attorney with the Manhattan firm Cohen and Gresser. According to the company's website, he has extensive experience in matters involving securities and commodities fraud, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, International Money Laundering, and Bank Secrecy Act violations. Everdell is a graduate of Princeton and Harvard. And according to the New York Times, Jeffrey S. Pagliuca and Laura Menninger, two Colorado-based lawyers, interesting, from the firm Haddon, Morgan, and Foreman. They have represented Ms. Maxwell for at least 5 years, including in civil litigation brought by women who accused Jeffrey Epstein. Maxwell makes a point of starting each day with a hug for all of her team. She shows that she's very much involved with her defense strategy by passing them index cards on which she has written points, which she feels are important. I've also heard she's drawing pictures, like strange pictures.
Okay, so there was like an incident where she looked at what are they called? Just the people that sit in the court and sketch out what the scenes. She like looked at them and saw that they were sketching her. So she started looking at them and sketching them. Like
that's what it was.
Okay, great.
Talk about crazy. I feel like if you stare in her eyes, you fall under her spell.
Oh, 100%.
So basically the defense strategy is twofold. One, tear apart all victim testimony, either due to memory, blurry facts, or their character, which is the worst. And then number two, put all the blame onto Jeffrey Epstein. And it seems like that's going pretty well for them, shockingly.
Yeah, it's without getting into too much detail, I guess they are really ripping into some of these victims, which like I guess is their job, but like how do you traumatize someone who's already dealing with all of this trauma? It's like I just on an empathy level of like caring about other people, like I would never want to do that to someone. And so it's kind of sad, but that's it. I feel like the only way that they're going to be able to help their client is to like say these people aren't credible and he's the person to blame, not our client.
And then the devil's advocate is they're just trying to get money. And she's, she's protecting herself as she should be able to if she hasn't done anything wrong. But it's so obvious that she has.
Yeah. And then this, we have so let me just interrupt really quick. So there's this Instagram and I forget her name, but her Instagram handle is House and Habit. So I don't actually know what she does for a living other than be like on social media. She says she's an entrepreneur. I don't know much about her. I just started following her kind of through this. And she's been actually going into the courtroom, taking notes and like sharing them on her social media. So we won't read them, verbatim, but we do have some talking points kind of from her. And I highly suggest going and following her. She has lots of good information because she's literally seeing it. And it's interesting too, because she's filming kind of outside the court to show you like what media is there and not there and kind of what the vibe is there. And obviously they can't have cameras inside, but she, takes a lot of notes and then like shares them on her Instagram.
So what does she say she sees outside? Or is there tons of media?
No, I saw one of the videos and it's one person outside.
That's absolutely shocking. One person?
And I mean, on the other side of the coin, like she probably doesn't know who's sitting in the court. I mean, she could be sitting next to someone who could be working for CNN. I mean, I don't know. But it's
but even like menial cases, you'll see tons of trucks out front, and this is a gigantic story.
There's more media coverage, like video wise, of like Jen Shaw than there is of this, which is
that's true.
Wild. Like it's just like you said, with everyone that's involved in this case or allegedly involved, it's kind of shocking that it's not getting like Kyle Rittenhouse type of coverage. And granted, I know the difference is it's not being filmed and all that stuff, but it is very interesting. So from the House of Habit, I keep messing up her name. Sorry. So I keep looking at it.
Sorry. That's a big deal. What you just said, like girls being trafficked and raped and all of this stuff is not as important as, like, obviously people died in Rittenhouse and that sort of thing, but that's just,
It's
I
so
mean,
sad. And it's unacceptable, really.
yeah, females are still treated so differently in this country.
Yeah. Not to get, because I think some people are turning this political, which it definitely should not be, has nothing to do with any of that stuff. But
Well, there's politicians involved.
Yeah, but I see on social media somehow this is becoming a right and left kind of thing, which
Oh,
is
really?
weird to me. I don't understand where that would even come from.
That is strange because he was good friends with Trump and he was good friends with Clinton. Like, he was friends on both sides. I do think it could be political, though, because allegedly what he would do is get tapes of people, and allegedly he had a tape of Trump and he was involved with Russians, and you can go down a whole rabbit hole. It's interesting. I mean, people will make anything political these days. It's repulsive. Like, it grosses me out to see Clinton. Anything with Trump grosses me out, but it's definitely changed my mind about a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess my whole point is, like, where's the outrage?
Yeah.
Where is it?
Even
guys?
Coverage. Where's one guy outside with a camera?
So, anyway, so part of her notes was, she was saying, Ghislaine comes in and she has a sort of, I don't know, what would you say, like, presence about her. Like, when she walks in the room, she grabs your attention. But she, talks about how she's very handsy and, like, hugging, which you and I talked about. It's kind of odd because she's British, and I don't find that to be a characteristic. I can't even talk. A characteristic of Britain, people from British people. Oh my God, I have words.
Yeah, I think her chart could have something to say about that. Her sun is in Capricorn. She's Gemini rising, and Gemini risings are very charismatic. They're very good with words, very good with people. And then her moon is in Leo, which, like, a few people, Marilyn Monroe, I think Bill Clinton has a Leo moon. They're very, they can attract people very well. They're seductive. So she has a lot of touchy-feely, tons, like, heavy Aquarius too, which is interesting because Jeffrey Epstein was an Aquarius. But yeah, in her chart, it shows that she's touchy-feely. I mean, look at what she's accused of. Obviously, she likes touching.
I know. I guess just to be so, like, huggy with your lawyer seems odd to me.
Maybe that's why they're making it look like.
Oh my God, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, like she jumps on top of every person she sees and caresses them and gives them massages. Like, enough with the massages. Just call it what it is.
I know. So she, she described, like, an interaction with some girl that she's not really sure who she is, but she says she locks eyes with this girl, Ghislaine. And I watch as she leans her whole body over the desk into this woman. The young woman seems enchanted with Ghislaine. They're smiling, her attention's glued, and there's, like, a gleam in her eyes. She's like, am I witnessing the magnetic appeal of the good time Ghislaine in action? So it's very interesting that in, like, one little interaction, she's noticing kind of this magnetism that she's got with people. And it's very interesting. So that was, and we have some more stuff from her later, but that was
there's been so many interesting things that have happened in this case so far. Like, we were talking about the drawing pictures. It's wild. So the first person to testify in this case was the longtime pilot of Jeffrey Epstein. We all have heard of the Lolita Express. He had his own plane, or several planes, something like that. The pilot testified that he did not know who was on the plane due to keeping the cockpit door closed. Which, did you know that? Have you heard that on Jeff Lewis? It's not called a cockpit anymore.
Oh my God, I totally didn't. I forgot. What is it called?
It's called a. Oh my gosh, I forgot. Well, you have to take cock out because now they're female pilots. So it's a flight deck.
Flight deck. Okay. The
Flight
more
deck.
you know, everyone.
Which sounds like Star Trek to me. When I hear flight deck, I'm like, what? I will be the old person like, that's a cockpit. It's not a flight deck. Anyway, so they kept the door closed, and he's saying he didn't know who was there, except for rarely he would be given a heads up if there was a VIP traveler, such as Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
He said
So I will just say really quick, he says more specifically to that, it wasn't like Epstein demanded that the door be shut. I think they shut it on preference. And then that's why they didn't really know a lot that was going on. But he did say like Epstein was not, I don't think he cared what people saw, I guess is my point. And the pilot was allowed to like walk back there if they needed to go to the bathroom or whatever. Like it was like a non-issue, but their preference was just to keep it shut.
I mean, I was a personal assistant, and you have to pretend you're invisible for sure. And you don't look at them, and you keep doors closed, but you're hyper aware because there's a very important person that you're working for. There's no way this guy wouldn't be like, who's getting up? Well, I mean, I would think,
says, as you're going to see in a second, he says like he would see as they were boarding, but it wasn't necessarily like, when you're getting on a plane and they're like greeting you, that doesn't happen on private. Pilot's not greeting you.
According to the New York Times, the names of some high profile passengers came out under cross-examination on Tuesday. And a lawyer for Miss Maxwell, Christian Everdell, asked Mr. Vazovsky if he remembered flying, quote, pretty important people, naming Bill Clinton, Donald J. Trump, Prince Andrew, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and the actor Kevin Spacey. Mr. Vazovsky said that he remembered traveling with all but Mr. Kennedy. He did not recall whether he ever flew the family of Mr. Trump, who traveled on the plane before his presidency. Everyone's seen like the pictures.
He's like, I remember everyone, but Robert F. Kennedy. And then he like kind of says he doesn't remember Trump. So which is it? Did you remember Trump on there or you not? Like, I don't understand what the actual answer is to that.
Very strange. Everyone is protecting somebody. It feels like very few people are being open and honest.
Yeah. So, and there's other weird stuff like, it's not funny. Sorry. I laugh when I'm uncomfortable, but like, I guess there's a part in the case too, so far, where they like bring in the massage table that they like confiscated and put it in the middle of the courtroom. Like, I don't know that I understand the point of that, because I think most people know what a massage table looks like, or you can show an image. Like the fact that they bring it in there,
maybe not. Maybe most people don't know what a massage table looks like. If they're in, where are they? Florida, New York.
So I just thought like stuff like that is so weird. And then, I mean, can you imagine? So one of the other guys, again, it's not funny, but he's like testifying to like things that he would find in the massage room, and he's having to talk about what is it called now? It's called like a twin torpedo dildo or something. Can you imagine having to like answer these questions? It's like, oh my God, it's just so uncomfortable. There's the 4 victims that we talked about earlier. So the first one to testify was under the pseudonym Jane, and she was a 14-year-old girl who was eating ice cream with her friends one afternoon in 1994 when a tall, thin woman with a cute little Yorkie walked by. And that ended up being Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. And it was played off as this kind of random coincidence. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think.
And they had a puppy, and they went to an ice cream shop. And they went
to where like a bunch of young girls were hanging out. So a little sus. And I guess he told the girls that he was a benefactor who gave to the camp and supported young talent. And he says, what a coincidence. Like, we live here too in Palm Beach, and asked for the phone number. And that's kind of how they attracted her. And, there's lots of coverage through the New York Times, like I said before, about each of these victims. But she does, kind of describe that Ghislaine definitely took part in some of these, and she would act like in these sexual assaults with this girl, Jane. And she said Maxwell acted like it wasn't a big deal. which is part of grooming, right? You're trying to desensitize, I feel like, and make them think this is normal. And she said that the abuse took place at Epstein's properties in Florida, New Mexico, and New York. So she must be part of the trafficking over state lines and all of that that's being taking place. And she said that, you know, Ghislaine also took like part in these sexual acts. And it's a little bit okay, so they started one of the days of court talking without the jury, and they're talking about how, I guess, Jane, after her being on the stand, had called her brother, who's supposed to also be testifying for whatever reason, probably a witness to what she's gone through. And Jane and her brother say it was just a flippant kind of conversation between siblings. And she like called like the main lawyer, Bobby, see you next Tuesday, and was just kind of explaining like her experience, and just kind of, but the thing that the defense is saying is that she warned him of some sort of document that was, I don't know what the document is or what it's about, but because of this conversation, now they're trying to make it where he can't testify. So again, like they're just poking holes wherever they can. And
yeah,
the judge,
it's wild how easy it is for them to do that too.
100%. I mean, it's, I don't know how people can do that with good conscience, but I get that they're doing their job, I guess. So it didn't seem like the judge had made a decision yet that I could find, but that's kind of what's been going on with her. Like I said, there's way more coverage of like her story and testimony if you just go to the New York Times, but like I said, I think the thing that's just hard is they're going in after these girls and they're trying to say, well, do you have a history with drugs, or do you have a history of this, or, you know, I don't know.
The tactics are so terrible. Like you never know. They could also just be asking the judge this to prolong it because they know that it's really hard on her. And, you know, a lot of people just give up after a while. So it's gross. Victim number 2 goes under the pseudonym Kate. She was approximately 17 years old and living in London when she met Ghislaine Maxwell during a trip to Paris. Kate gave Maxwell her phone number, and Maxwell called her a few weeks later to invite her over for tea. Kate was excited, she said, to have made such a sophisticated and elegant connection. She seemed to be everything I wanted to be, Kate said. She seemed as excited as I was to have a new friend. And again,
and that's intoxicating, like, right? You meet someone who's got this status that you think, and this allure to them, and they're interested in you, and they're, you know, all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, okay, and it makes you feel a certain way. And it's just so sad how they like just get these girls. It's
Ghislaine was good too. She obviously put on a good show. Within a few weeks, Kate said she was engaging in sexually explicit massages with Epstein at Maxwell's London townhome, which was in the same neighborhood where Kate then lived with her mother. Prior to her testimony, Judge Allison Nathan read to the jury a limiting instruction informing them that Kate was over the legal age of consent at all relevant times and locations, and therefore the jury cannot convict Maxwell of any charge in the indictment based on her testimony. The government is thus only permitted to describe her as a witness, but not a victim.
So this is why I was going to say, remember that there's 4, because her testimony basically doesn't count for some of this stuff, which is, I don't know, it's very weird.
It's like, not as if you turn
could talk. Like, I don't get like why,
but still, well, they probably have no, I mean, very few people want to talk. Look at what happens to them.
They're all using pseudonyms to like not try and be dragged. Like,
but it's so dumb because like the age of consent, I think they're referring to that because the age of consent in England is 16, but it's not as if you turn 16 and then you have your prefrontal cortex. Like, no, you can be groomed at any age. That's why like the stigma needs to go away. So more people need to talk about this, because that's so upsetting and probably makes her feel like, oh, did anything really happen to me? I can't imagine the shame she feels from that.
I mean, and look how brave she is, because if she's not even being considered a victim towards like more charges for this person, I wonder if she's going, why am I doing this? Like, why am I putting myself through this? Unless she is getting some sort of like healing from it, you know, to be able to like say her truth, but it's heartbreaking and very brave of her to speak up.
Mhm.
So, third victim to testify was under the pseudonym Carolyn. So she's grew up in New York and then moved to Florida in 1999. Her family members were also in the courthouse, and we're seeing these polished people with these models and these wannabe actresses or whatever. But I guess Carolyn was kind of the opposite of that, according to people who were sitting there and watching this. They're saying that she's rough around the edges and that her backstory is dark. She describes a poor upbringing with drug addicted mother, neglect, and having sexual abuse at a young age. And she said she lived in a house with, quote, no rules.
Mm.
So by 14, she had met Virginia Roberts. So if you follow this case, you definitely should know that name. She's basically the one, I think, that got things in motion for a lot of this. And she's done a lot of interviews. The most
She's the one in
famous,
the picture. Sorry.
the most famous way you would recognize that she's the one in the picture with Prince Andrews when she was like 15 or something crazy. So she befriended Virginia, and Virginia asks her because, as according to her interviews that she's done, this was a way to get herself out of it, because if you give him someone new, like, you're out of, and that's horrible, but that's what you have to do to survive in these situations.
Yeah.
So Virginia began, asking Carolyn, do you want to make some money by giving massages? She agrees because obviously she's coming from not a great background, and extra money would probably, be the world to her.
Mhm.
And they drive over to Epstein's immediately, and she describes the first encounter at the Palm Beach mansion. And she says she was greeted by an older woman with black shoulder-length hair and an accent. What does that sound like? So she says she's friendly and shows them to the staircase where Virginia leads them to the massage table. And she then tells Caroline when they're in the room and Epstein's like over there brushing his teeth, oh, he prefers them nude when you massage. And she was like, I'm not doing that. And so she watched Virginia massage him, and then the two of them had sex in front of her. And she sat on the couch, and she said next to her were 2 stacks of $300 bills that were left for the girls.
Mm.
Like, and yeah, what? And she goes on to talk about how she became a regular at Epstein's. And she goes on to talk about the massage appointments and how she originally refused to have sex with him. So he would have sex with other girls in front of her and then try to like get her to, it sounds like he tried to get her to maybe have intimacy with like other women or something. I think he was trying to get it to be not a weird thing for her. So he was like, oh, the more she sees it, maybe she'll interact. I don't know. But she says that Ghislaine saw her naked at least 30 times, and on one occasion came into the bathroom and fondled her breast, telling her that she had great shape for Jeffrey and his friends. And then she soon received lingerie, money, and concert tickets as gifts. And when she
This
was
is
asked,
also sorry, go ahead.
when she was asked how many times she visited Epstein's house, she said about 100.
Oh, it's so disgusting and shocking, but not uncommon to hear of a man doing this, but a man and a woman. I mean, granted, she doesn't have kids. That shouldn't matter. Women that don't have
listen to
kids
this.
still wouldn't do this.
So listen to this. So she kept going to his house between the ages of 14 and 18. She had a child at 16 with her then boyfriend. She moved away, but then she came back. And when she came back, she was over the age of 18. And Epstein asked her if she had any younger friends for him. So she had basically aged out. And then he was trying to get her to recruit more people. And then kind of going into what we were saying about the defense, the cross-examination, I guess, was really rough. And they repeat that she had to be like, they had to repeat like questions to her. She was having a hard time following for whatever reason was going on. And then she snapped at the defense at one point, and she, is break down crying. And She said she lives in a constant state of paranoia because of what she's been through, terrified for her own daughters that they will be trafficked or kidnapped. And then they bring up a 2007 FBI testimony that she was involved in, and they start poking holes in it. I mean, they go over like pages and pages of it in details and trying to basically catch her in a lie, because she received an estimate or a settlement, and if she's caught lying at any point, then they can like ask for it back basically. And so they're not only trying to like poke holes in her story, but then that has like serious consequences for her too, like, which is so anyways, I guess she lost it at one point, yelling, "No amount of money will ever make up for what that woman did to me." Which, like, good for her. I mean, I know that that's not a great reaction, but to show that how hurt and destroyed you are and yelling at something like, hello, like she's a human being and she deserves to have justice. And I get, like I said, that they're doing their job, but it's at the expense of people's I don't even know what I'm trying to say. But
it's just so sad that this still is not important to people, and people just want it to like go away because disgusting people want to keep it going and other people want to act like it doesn't happen, you know.
So the last victim hasn't testified. I believe we'll have that information come out in the next like day or so. I'm actually shocked. So this trial was supposed to go until January, and I can't remember what side said that they'll be done bringing people up by the 9th of December. And so they think that this is going to wrap like before the holidays.
Wow.
Which I feel like, why? I have so many questions. Like, why are there only 4 victims testifying? Like, there seems to be many more people that were affected, even if they were just witnesses to things. It doesn't seem like
people have already gotten to those people allegedly and threatened them or given them money and said, keep your mouth shut.
Oh my God. I mean, it's really terrifying actually. So, and yeah, so literally House in Habit. She's doing great coverage. She's got great information. I highly recommend following her at the New York Times, also doing great coverage.
It's House in Habit.
Yeah. So HOUSEINHABIT.
Okay. House in Habit. Okay. Awesome. I'm so glad she's covering this.
Oh my gosh. She's doing a phenomenal job. So that's, as of right now, what's going on every day. There's a little bit something new. I think, on a weekly basis, we're going to try and recap a little bit of like what's been going on, which sounds like it's not going to go on for too much longer, which is crazy, but yeah, stay tuned for this. And the talking points, I guess, is what we'll be bringing you.
Yeah,
there's
definitely
a lot to cover, but not quite as much as there should be, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we want to bring it to everyone. So we will stay on top of that and many other cases. And we have some new ones coming for you. So stay tuned. As usual, follow us on social media. Jenna makes a mean TikTok. Check it out.
It's been a while. Sorry. This time of year has been kicking my butt. But we're available to contact us, communicate through YouTube, DMs, whatever. So yeah. So
until then, and trust your gut.
We'll see you guys next week.
Adios.
Yeah.